Good morning and happy new year. It is 2023. Can you believe it? Man, I'm going to be honest with you. When I was a kid and I thought about the 2000s and I thought about years like 20, of course, watching Back to the Future, 2015, right? But I literally thought we'd be flying in cars by now. I know that they've developed them, but if we can't even handle driving on the road, I don't want to imagine us in the sky. So thank goodness that hasn't happened. Hoverboards, they don't look like I thought they were going to look. All right. Marty was doing the hoverboard back in 1985. Like that was pretty awesome. I just thought it'd be different. I don't know about you. I know one thing's for sure different. I'm older and a lot more things hurt than they were hurting whenever I was a kid. So maybe you can kind of identify with that. I don't know. But think about it for a moment. What did you think 2023 would be like if you were around in the 90s or the 80s, or heck, if you were around in the 40s and the 50s? My grandmother was born in 1930, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been 33. I don't know. She's in her 90s. She's been around for a hot minute, okay? But I wonder, like, did she even fathom what the world would be like today? I'd like for us to think about that for a moment, because I think we can all identify with this. Most of us can identify with finding ourselves in situations we didn't think were going to turn out the way they did. I mean, come on, like, let's be honest. Most of us, except for a few of you wonderfully lucky ones out there, we'll call you blessed, hashtag blessed, all right, who married your high school sweetheart. Some of us, that ain't the case, right? Some of us, if we go back and think about the people we were with in high school, we don't want anybody to know. And before you get a little bit too, jokey about that other person you were with in high school, just remember that other person was with you, and they're probably saying the same thing you are right now. However, things don't always turn out the way we thought they were going to turn out. If it's not relationships, think about business opportunities. Maybe not all of us, set out on that first business venture and made it. Things turn out different. Think about your first career path. For those of you kids still for those of you young adults still in college, think about your major, something as simple as your major that started out thinking about what you were going to pursue and how excited you were about it. And then halfway through realized, I don't know if I really want to do this, and then begin to pivot and make changes. Think about just people that you thought would be around forever, but you finished and they're not there anymore. Or maybe you didn't finish and you wonder, what would things be like if only? I feel like I've done an okay job laying out, understanding that things don't always turn out the way that we expect them to. So in thinking about that, I believe that if I asked 100 people, is there something in your life that didn't turn out the way you thought it would? I think I'd get 100% response. Yes, there are things in my life that didn't turn out the way I thought they would. Now, I'm not one of those people that tries to always go gloom, doom, and despair, because sometimes things not turning out the way you thought they would is a good thing. Oh man, if you've ever been in a court case, you know what I'm saying? And you thought, man, they're throwing the whole book at me, and then you realize it didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out. Or if in business you ever made a hire and that person, when they walked in the door, they were just a warm body. You ever been in situations where, hey, I can't be too picky about who I'm going to bring in here and put in place. I just need a warm body. I just need somebody who can wave. I'll work with the smile. Sometimes you just need just a corpse. You just need somebody to be there. Unfortunately, going back to relationships, some of us have sought out relationships that way. We ain't too picky about the details. We're just looking for a warm body. I'll go ahead and digress from that for a second. But then they turn out to be this rock star. They just turn out to be the person that goes the extra mile, that's willing to do whatever you need them to do, that goes above and beyond, that all of a sudden gifts start to come out that they didn't even know were there. Sometimes things turn out different than we expected, and it's a good thing. It's not always a bad thing. So what I've been asking God for is, I said, Lord, there's got to be a formula. Because regardless if things turn out the way I didn't ever think they'd turn out, or things turn out the way I never thought they'd turn out, regardless of which expression you have, God is always about giving us that still small voice, that little whisper in the middle of the chaos that keeps us steady so that we can see, so that we're able to finally see which one of the two it's going to be. And regardless of which one it's going to be, if it didn't turn out the way you thought it would, or if it didn't turn out the way you thought it would, you're still able to hold steady and see the faithfulness of God. Now, that's what today is going to be about. I was honest with you last week when I said I'm not going to be before you long. I'm going to be honest with you again this week. And here's why. I don't want you to get sick of hearing my voice before tonight, because we're going to be at the Science Spectrum tonight at 6 o'clock. So I'm not going to just come at you for a real long time this morning, because we have a word for you tonight at Right Now Church. We'll be at the Science Spectrum at 6 p.m., 2579 South Loop 289. Join us. Listen, we're going to be in the exhibit hall. If you joined us last week, we're going to be in the exact same spot we were last week. If you didn't join us last week, then we're not going to be on at the entrance that is directly on 74th Street. We are just west of that. You'll see our flags outside. Somebody will be ready to greet you with a warm smile and a happy hello and a happy new year. And then we'll get you inside. We're going to have an amazing night of worshiping God, being in the presence of the Lord together, and then receiving an empowering word so that we can forge ahead in 2023. So, like I said, won't be before you long right now. Probably going to be before you long tonight. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to keep that one under control and keep it tamed as well. So be there tonight. Invite someone with you. Listen, you probably already ate the brisket. Probably already had some ribs and some barbecue. You probably already did all that last night. Maybe you're going to do it again today. When you're done eating, most people finish 3, 4 o'clock. Go ahead and come on out 6 p.m. We cannot wait to be there together with you. 6 o'clock, Science Spectrum, 2579 South Loop 289. We're in the southwest entrance of the Science Spectrum. Bring your kids. We cannot wait to be together with you. So in going back and thinking about how many times things just don't turn out the way we thought they were going to turn out, I started to contemplate the life of Paul. When I think about a life not turning out the way I thought it would, I got to put myself as Paul's friend. I don't think I can put myself as Paul, because, man, Paul's a gift. Like he's a gem to who we are as believers, because he left so much valuable truth so that we could glean from. So I don't think I could I would never do him the disservice of putting me in his position. I try to put myself as one of his friends. And I always try to put myself as different friends, because we always imagine ourselves as that one friend that's the ride or die. But sometimes you just might be the not right at all friend. So it's important to put yourself in all positions. And that's something I do. I try to put myself in every position of every person. So Paul is writing a letter to Timothy. In 2 Timothy, he's written 2 because Paul's been in prison. He's been in prison for years. And in being in prison, his life isn't turning out probably quite the way everyone thought it would. Now, if you remember the story of Paul, or if you've ever heard the story of Paul, Paul didn't start out being known as Paul. He was actually known as Saul of Tarsus. And Saul of Tarsus was a very, very zealot person. He loved God, who he knew as Yahweh. He loved him. He actually loved him so much, he was very zealous. He went after people who were preaching about Jesus because they believed that the teaching of Jesus was heresy. They believed that Jesus was announcing that he was God. And as you know, the first commandment says, you shall put no other God before me. So somebody walking around saying that they're God would be heresy. And that was a sin that was punishable by death. But it was definitely against the law as well, because Rome had given the Jews jurisdiction to create their own law based on the theocratic beliefs that they had. So He was zealous for God. He was doing what he thought was right. And then he has an encounter with Jesus. And in having this encounter with Jesus, Saul of Tarsus, who was a zealot for the things of the Lord, becomes Paul. It's almost God changes his name or he gives him an alias. I don't know, because people probably knew Saul and remembered, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to go to a place where they're talking about Jesus and Saul of Tarsus shows up because he's been putting people to death who were preaching about Jesus. This could be a trick. So I'm not going to go. So I don't know. They didn't have Facebook. He didn't have an Insta story. Like there was no reels that anybody could post and show the big dynamic change in Saul of Tarsus. So, God changed his name. I may be making light of it. Just laugh with me. I'm going to say God gave him an alias. God gave him an alias so that people said, oh, that's not Saul, that's Paul. Sounds the same. And truth is, in their language, it doesn't sound the same. So it's fun in English. Okay, so just stay with me. He's going around preaching, and man, people are getting saved in droves. Churches are being planted everywhere. He's going to Macedonia. He finds himself in Asia. He finds himself in Greece. He's going to all the places the Jews aren't willing to go, and he's ministering to Gentiles, and they're giving their lives to Jesus and seeing signs and wonders. So if you can imagine, like, come on, like, Paul's about to plant the first mega church. It's about to go down. I'm telling you, he's about to be giving stuff away and having all these outreaches. Paul's about to do the thing. He's planting churches everywhere. But instead, Paul goes through a series of arrests, being shipwrecked, and then being arrested for preaching the message that he was preaching. And, Paul, the first time he went to prison, guess what happened? There was an earthquake. God broke him out of prison. Like he literally ran the first jailbreak offense. Like he for real broke out of that bad boy. He didn't stay there. So maybe people were waiting for a moment in time whenever God was going to relieve him from that situation too. It wasn't working out the way he thought it would. And we find ourselves in these two letters, these last two letters that he's writing. And what we learn about him is that Paul found himself being a superstar in one moment to now being a castaway. He actually has to encourage Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1. I'll be in 2 Timothy with you for the most part of today. We're going to bounce from the beginning to the end, okay? 2 Timothy chapter 1 in the 8th verse, here's what he says. He says, therefore do not be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me, his prisoner, but share with me in the sufferings for the gospel according to the power of God. Check this out. Paul is literally having to encourage Timothy to not be embarrassed by him. Paul, who started off walking down the streets and demons were saying, hey, yeah, I know who Paul is. I even know who Jesus is, but who are you? Like, he had clout on both sides. And here Paul is having to encourage Timothy, don't be embarrassed of me. He even goes on to say that in verse 15, this you know, that all those in Asia have turned away from me. And then he lists two of the names. I'm going to give them a break today. I'm not even going to say their names because I can't. It's too hard to pronounce for me. It says, the Lord grant mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chain. Another person that he's bragging about just because they weren't embarrassed. But when he arrived in Rome, he sought me out very zealously and found me. Isn't it amazing that Paul, who had started off preaching to the thousands, was now bragging about the people who simply weren't embarrassed by him? I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you feel like you may have caused shame, or maybe been in a situation where somebody else embarrassed you. But man, don't you just want to put that person in a little box and hide them in a dark closet whenever somebody embarrasses you? There's nothing worse than being embarrassed. Oh my goodness. It's probably why of the top 3 fears in the world, one of them is speaking in front of people. Why? Because it's embarrassing. It can be really embarrassing to speak in front of people. It's literally the fear of death, the fear of heights, and the fear of public speaking. That's crazy to me. I'm not even really afraid of the first 2, by sure ain't afraid of the third one, but I understand why people are, because it's embarrassing. It is extremely embarrassing whenever you're not able to control or isolate and identify what other people's thoughts are about us. And being embarrassed is, think about it. Have you ever been, you get so embarrassed, the temperature of your body changes. Like, come on, that's ridiculous. You can get embarrassed and it will literally begin to feel like you've ran 3 or 4 miles. I assume, allegedly. I've never run 3 or 4 miles, so I don't know what that feels like. I've ran 1 and I've also been embarrassed and I sweat the same amount in both situations. But being embarrassed creates a lot of grief. So in thinking about this, I'm going somewhere, so stay with me. In thinking about this, I realized something. There's got to be a place to find an even keel so that when things don't turn out the way I think they should, or man, they didn't turn out the way I think they should, I am still okay. You ready to be okay? Okay. I said okay a lot on purpose. That was for dramatic effect. Now let's go into 2 Timothy chapter 4. And here's what he says. For I am already, hold on, no, you know what? Yeah, here it is. For chapter 4, verse 6. For I am already poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. Paul is saying, listen, I know I'm not going to get out of this prison. I'm going to die here. He said, but look at what he says about himself. He identified 3 characteristics about himself. It's a very familiar passage if you've been around preaching or teaching in any capacity at all, or if you've been to a funeral. You've probably heard this. But I'm going to extract some things from it and then I'm going to be out, okay? Here's what he says. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I started to think about this passage, this one verse. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. And I started to think, what if every believer learned how to fight the good fight, to finish what we start, and to keep what's most valuable? And in thinking about that, I realized a lot of us, we know how to fight, but we often get caught fighting the wrong fight. I've found myself on the wrong side of the right fight and on the right side of the wrong fight. I've caught myself in both situations. I've often realized that fighting does something, okay? Fighting not only creates the opportunity for there to be a winner that is identified and a loser that is identified, but fighting also makes you tired. Have you ever just been exhausted? I've woke up before and been tired already. You ever just woke up already tired? You know, not sleepy. That's different. I mean, just wake up tired, like just wake up and not rested. Paul says, I've fought the good fight. There's a fight that is good and wholesome. We live in a day and age where we'll fight about anything. We fight about Republican and Democrat. We fight about gay or straight. We fight about believer, unbeliever. We fight about which organization or denomination are you a part of. We fight about capitalism and communism. We fight about everything. Cowboys or any other team. We fight about everything. Who's your college? Who's my college? What's your favorite color? My favorite color. Who do you like? Star Wars or Star Trek? Do you know? Are you Marvel or are you DC? Like which is which? We fight about everything. But how many of the fights that we're fighting are good fights? Not fighting a good fight like, oh man, he really fought a good fight. No, no, no. Is the fight that you're fighting good? There are very few things that we really ought to be willing to oppose. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells us to be vigilant of one thing, and it actually isolates our adversary as one person. It says, be vigilant for your adversary, the devil. Very, very simple. So there's only one good fight for me to be engaged in, and it's the fight against my adversary, who is not the person that disagrees with me up the street, is not the person that gave me the Hawaiian peace sign driving down the street. It's not the person who said they didn't really care for my style of preaching. My adversary is not the person who has an opinion of me. My adversary is the very devil that is roaming around as a roaring lion seeking to devour me. It's the one who wants to see me defeated. It's not the people who are offended or upset with me. It's the one who hopes I don't fight this fight anymore. It's the one who hopes I will just finally relinquish my hold on what God has said belongs to me. The Bible tells us that if God is for us, then who can be against us? So then I'm not worried about the who that is opposing me. I'm more concerned about staying in the one who is greater on the inside of me. I've got to be willing to fight a good fight. I've got to be willing to fight the fight that God has put me in. And the fight that God has put me in is not against anyone else. It's against myself. It's against making sure that my flesh stays under subjection. It's against making sure that the sins of the past, that the habits of the people in my past, that the generational mishaps and the generational confusion that has taken place throughout the course of many generations in my family that have led to alcoholism, drug addiction, early death, infidelity, failed marriages, those things that have happened throughout my lifetime and throughout the lifetime of those before me. It's to make sure that I don't perpetuate those things in the lives of my children so that they don't model it in the lives of their children. God has put me in a good fight, but it's not against anybody else. It is against me. It is making sure that I keep myself under subjection. That's why Paul, the same person, also wrote, therefore I beat my body into subjection and I make it my slave to the obedience of Christ. The only fight he was fighting was the fight with himself. He said, therefore I do not train as one who does not have an opponent. Paul knew what fight he was engaged in, and it didn't have anything to do with anybody else. In the letter that I'm reading to you right now to Timothy, what's interesting is he mentions the people that had walked away from them. But do you realize that it immediately changes to the ones who didn't? Whew, man, that's bad. Paul gave one sentence in this letter. You know that everyone in Asia has left me. He gave two names, and then he said, but I'm so grateful for. It immediately moved into the one who said, you know what? Not only did he not leave me, but as soon as he got here, he came looking for me. Like it says, he was very zealous. It's interesting that Paul was, because when he was Saul, was zealous. So you know what Saul was saying? Onesiphorus, he looked for me the way I used to look for people who were preaching Jesus. The same energy that I used to put into finding people who I thought were preaching heresy, he put into finding me. If you will stay in the fight that God has put you in, and remember, I'm not talking about the fight with people. I'm not talking about the fight for success. I'm saying if you will stay engaged in the fight that causes us to want to jump out of our convictions and go against what God has called us to. If you will stay engaged in the fight, God will send support looking for you that is zealous to find you. Don't give up. Somebody, if you're not by yourself right now, look at your neighbor and say, don't stop fighting. Sometimes you just need somebody in your corner that's reminding you to keep swinging, that's reminding you not to drop your guard, that's reminding you to look for your open shot. Sometimes you just need somebody in your corner who's going to let you sit down in between rounds and allow you to spit into their bucket. They're going to allow you to wash your mouth out so that the taste of what you've been going through can come out. Sometimes you just need people in your corner that encourage you to fight, that don't tell you to withdraw. They don't throw in the towel. They give you insight for the next round. They tell you to go back in. Listen, in 2023, I'm declaring in your life, you're going to get one or two people in your corner that are cheering you on to keep on fighting. It's interesting that in a boxing match, not everybody is in the corner of the boxer. It's 2 or 3 people. You got the coach, you got the cut man, you got the doctor, you got the one that says it's time to pull out, you got the one that just takes care of the cuts, because cuts happen, wounds take place, and then you've got the one who's laying out the strategy. I'm believing people in your corner so that you can fight. But if you're going to fight, we got to be willing to finish. Paul said, finish the race. I finished the race. I finished. What sense of accomplishment when you finish. You know, I remember my father told me he's been to the Big Texan in Amarillo, Texas with the big steak. And my father's actually finished the steak. And he talked about the sense of accomplishment that came when he finished the steak. I know what he's talking about because there used to be a place in San Antonio, Texas called the Jailhouse Cafe. And the Jailhouse Cafe had this huge chicken fried steak. It's like it would fall off the plate. And if you finished the chicken fried steak, they gave you a cinnamon roll. Now, the cinnamon roll was the same size as the chicken fried steak. I mean, it was massive, like good enough for 5 or 6 people. Huge. Well, your boy didn't just finish the chicken fried steak, he finished the cinnamon roll too. Can I tell you that when that meal was over, I had no cognitive reasoning anymore. My friends were asking me questions and I was talking to them like some of y'all might have been talking to your friend last night after one too many. Like I was food drunk. I'd never been food drunk before in my life. I didn't even know that was a thing, but it was Jailhouse Cafe and I could have got a DUI on the way home. I was under the influence of a chicken fried steak and a cinnamon roll. If they would have asked me, have you been drinking? I'd have said milk. Because with that cinnamon roll, I did have some milk right after the chicken fried steak. But I remember when it was over, yes, I felt the sense of accomplishment. But do you know something? I also felt a little bit dizzy and really tired. Now, I don't know if that's the same way somebody feels when they finish a marathon, because I've never run a marathon. And I'll venture to say somebody who has finished a marathon has never ever eaten a 2-pound chicken fried steak and a 2-pound cinnamon roll. I'm a venture. So maybe, hey, don't judge me. Maybe I haven't done what you've done, but you haven't done what I've done either. But I can venture to say, because I've seen people finish those marathons, they looked a lot like I looked when I finished that chicken fried steak and that cinnamon roll. They looked like needed help to the car. I had to have somebody drive me home. Like, I'm not kidding. I wish I were joking. I had to have a friend drive me home from lunch because I ate too much, okay? There's this sense of accomplishment, but then there's this sense of weariness that comes when you're finished. It's this teeter-totter between two places that says, I'm finished, but I'm done. Jesus, when he was on the cross, he said these words, it is finished. The Bible says that he'd been beaten beyond the point of recognition. So he finished, but he was tired. Matter of fact, he also said he was thirsty. I want you to hear me. We can't always finish with the same energy we started with, but we can finish. I want to talk to the person will you just give me a minute to talk to the couple who's been working through a strenuous relationship that hit you hard in 2022. You've been working through some things coming to the surface in your life. And at the point, it's starting to wonder, man, will I ever have the same glimmer in their eye that I used to have before everything happened? Can I tell you something today? Just finish. Finish. Don't bail. Don't quit. Don't turn in the towel. Finish. I want to be the cut man in your corner if you let me today. I want to tell you, yeah, there's some bruising. There's some swelling. I'm going to put some pressure on this to try to keep it under control. I'm going to make sure that we wipe the blood off the cut. And just give me a moment and we're going to rub some oil on it. We're going to put some Vaseline on there so that, because the next blow, now that they know there's a wound, he's going to keep coming after the same wound to try to take you out of this fight. So I'm going to put something on that'll cause the punches to slide off. It'll cause the wounds to slide off. It's still going to hurt, but it won't have as deep as an impact if it were dry and left unattended. I'm the cut man in your corner. Maybe they're going to say some comments about you that are true. Maybe they're going to bring up some things from the past that you did do. But can I tell you today that if you'll remember that the one on the inside of you has graced you and given you forgiveness to press through in this season, that God has already wiped the slate clean, even though people haven't, they're still going to throw the salt. They're still going to throw the punches because they're hurting too. But can I remind you today, please let me encourage you and let you know that God has redeemed you. God has forgiven you, and let that be the lubricant that you need for the punches and the blows to slide right off. Finish your race. It's a race. You're supposed to get tired. It's a race. It's supposed to be hard. I've never seen anybody finish a race with a Twinkie and an ice cream. Finish the race. But then he says, kept the faith. Fought the good fight. Finished the race. Kept the faith. Strikes me as interesting because if I were writing the letter, I think I would have said, I fought the good fight. I kept the faith. I finished the race. To me, it feels like finish the race will go last, regardless of what you do with the other two. Even if you kept your faith, fought a fight, and then finished the race. But finishing the race seems like it should come last. But Paul doesn't do that. He says he kept the faith after fighting and after finishing. I also think it's interesting that he started out fighting a fight and ended off running a race, and then is done when he's kept what he was holding on to. It's almost as if it was a decathlon, or I guess this would be a triathlon, of having to hold on to something while finishing and fighting and finishing, while fighting and running. I'm reminded, and I wish I could remember the name of the father who had a son who is a quadriplegic. And he began training for triathlons and decathlons. And he would swim with his son tied to him. And he would ride a bike with his son propped up on the bike. And then he would carry his son as he was running his race. I think about this because the son enjoyed the finish of the race while the father was the one taking on the abuse. But the father was never interested in finishing the race without his son. He probably could have won all of these races had he only been carrying his own weight, but he carried the weight of his son, because to him, to finish without his son was not finishing. He had to keep what was valuable. I need you to finish as you finish 2022, and we're at day one of 2023. Keep your faith. Hold on to your faith. Hold fast to the faith. Keep it. Don't let it go. Paul said, I didn't just fight, I kept my faith. What does that mean? That even though I fought, I didn't finish angry with anybody. I didn't finish bitter. I didn't finish with unforgiveness. I didn't fight to injure. I fought to finish. Even though I finished my race, I didn't finish my race and let go of it all. I finished my race and held on to what kept me through it. He says, I've kept the faith. So many of us get so caught up in an idea and a desire to quit and throw in the towel because we've laid down the most important thing. We've laid down the faith. We've laid down our faith. We've put our faith to the side. Somewhere in the middle of all of this strategizing and planning, we thought our plan was good enough. We thought our structure and strategy was strong enough. But can I tell you, your faith is what has to be mature. You've got to be willing to take a licking and keep on ticking. You've got to be willing to press through pain even when it hurts. We have to be willing to struggle and strive just to keep going, because faith is what keeps us going. The Bible says now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is keep going even though it doesn't make sense and you don't see it anymore. Faith is continuing. When you come tonight, I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like. But faith means I do it because God has strengthened me to do it. Keep your faith. Told you I wouldn't be before you too long, and I'm going to keep my word. I want for you to be with us tonight. Show up. We got a word for you. I can't wait to see you there. We're going to be there once again, 2579 South Loop 289, 6 p.m. The Science Spectrum will be in the exhibit hall. If you get there a little bit early, I don't think they close until 6, so they'll point you in the direction of where we are. Just tell them you're there for Right Now Church's Collective, and they know exactly where to send you. I love you. Cannot wait to see you this evening. We're going to pray. We're going to be there with one another. Bye-bye. We love you and we'll see you.